alikuwa amekataa kurejista chama chetu cha wanafunzi cha Sonu. Na Jaramogi tulipoenda kumuona akatusukuma mpaka hiyo chama yetu ikakuwa registered. I remember one time TJ Kajwang and myself went to see the then Attorney General Amos Wako, who was here today. And Amos Wako told me, young man, I understand your position, but my hands are tied. And he could not do anything about it. So Amos Wako, I don't know whether he's still around, he was trying to convince us, just accept to be expelled. Mkubali tu mfukuzwe katika university. Wakati tulifukuzwa kutoka university, Jaramogi Oginga Odinga akapiga simu, akatafuta mtu anaitwa Gerard Otieno Kajwang na akamuamurisha aende mpaka at 6 p.m. And that's how I managed to finish my university, courtesy of Jaramogi Oginga Odinga. Kabisa. Later, when Jaramogi died, I remember we went to Bondo. We went to Bondo to bury Jaramogi Oginga Odinga. And I remember James Orengo almost took over the funeral ceremony with his famous quote of Mark Antony. 1 year later, during the first Teroburu, when we went to Kangoka Jaramogi, and Moi said that there is not going to be live music. Nakumbuka ilikuwa saa 1 jioni. DC wakati huo alikuwa anaitwa Kirito wa Mai, akatupa tear gas usiku. Nakumbuka tukipitia pahali kuna cactus huko Kangoka Jaramogi, tukiwa na Oburu in a very small hall. So therefore, I come here today to celebrate a legend and to celebrate a part of Kenyan history that shall never be taken away. The challenge we have as we honor Jaramogi today is to be that generation that can make a difference. I believe deep down in my heart that we can relive and relaunch the nationalist credentials that Jaramogi and others lived. It may not be from a monolithic thinking as it was when Jaramogi and Kenyatta teamed up. It may not be from the same political party, but we can have an agreement on things that we can never have a dispute about. We can agree on a set of ideals that brings Kenya together. May God rest Jaramogi Oginga Odinga in eternal peace. Asante sana.
Asante sana, Waziri Moses Kuria. Can we have order in the house, please? Tafadhali. Asante sana. Asanteni sana. Now we are going to have presentations from abroad from 4 scholars in Great Britain and the US who have studied Kenya very well in politics and economics and who knew Jaramogi as many of us do. So I'm going to request them to take 5 minutes each. I hope the electronics is ready for me to call Professor David Thrupp of George Washington University. He will be followed by Professor John Lonsdale of Cambridge University. And then our brother John Kamau, who is a well-known journalist in Kenya, but currently is doing his postgraduate studies and in Toronto, writes very good articles in the papers, well researched and from archives and so on. And finally, from Professor Robert Mason of West Virginia University. So first, let me request Professor David Thrupp of George Washington University to come on, please. Please listen to him very carefully. Pay attention as Professor David Thrupp addresses you for 5 minutes, followed by the others. Thank you.
Gentlemen, I only met Jaramogi once when he was campaigning to honor him. I think you can divide his career into 6 phases. First, the period of his education at Masino, the Alliance High School, Makerere, and then back to teach at Masino. And that period demonstrated, I think, his willingness to stand up and challenge authority in 2 famous confrontations with Carrie Francis. First as a pupil at Masino, and then just before he went to Makerere over Carrie Francis's appointment as the new headmaster of the Alliance High School. The second period is, I think, extremely important and underestimated. And that is the period from 1945 until he was elected to the Legislative Council in 1957, when he revived, along with Walter Odede and Achieng-Oneko, the Luo Union, and played a pivotal role in the formation of Rutatco, the Luo Thrift and Trading Corporation. And it was during these years, 1945 to 1957, that he really captured the influence over the Luo community. First, as representative of the emerging Luo elite, but also representing the voice of the have-nots of Kisumu, and perhaps most importantly, as the spokesman of the Luo peasantry. It was his critique of soil conservation measures and stocking and cattle dipping, I think, in the 1940s and 1950s, defending traditional peasant principles that catapulted him into the position of Gur and leader of the Luo community, a position that in many respects he was to hold until his death in 1994. The third phase, and the one that we will know about, but which I'm going to talk about perhaps in a little more detail, echoing Michael Chege, is the period of the struggle for Kanu, the struggle from his election to the Legislative Council in 1957 until he resigned as Vice President of Kanu and Vice President of Kenya to form the Kenya People's Union in 1966. 1958, as has been mentioned, is a pivotal year, pivotal speech, when he says that the real leader of the Kenyan nationalist movement is Jomo Kenyatta, and that the rest of us sitting here in the Legislative Council are really merely his representatives. And Kenyatta has to be released to play his rightful role in Kenyan politics. But that relationship became tested. And as early as January 1964, it was already evident at the time of the Lynette coup in the KAR that Kenyatta had become a little bit more suspicious of ODINGA, of the Jaramogi. And that concern, that suspicion grew at the end of the year on Jamhuri Day, December 1964, when Kenyan African Democratic Union disbanded, was incorporated into KANU, and changed the balance of ideological forces within the ruling party. The 12th of December 1964, of course, is also the date when Oginga Odinga took Jomo Kenyatta to open the Lumumba Institute, which was to be a training school for KANU officials. And in May 1965, on the graduation of the first class from the Lumumba Institute, they made the mistake, a fatal mistake, I think, looking back, to seize control of KANU headquarters, to proclaim that the leadership of KANU, apart from Kenyatta and ODINGA, had all been dismissed, and to usher in a left-wing platform. That event, May 1965, marked in many ways the end of Jaramogi's personal relationship with President Kenyatta. At the same time, of course, you have the rumors about the Russian ship providing weapons and supplies, being shadowed by the Royal Navy, and coming into the port of Mombasa. In fact, of course, it arrived first in Dar es Salaam. If there were any weapons, they were unloaded, and then subsequently made its way into Mombasa, where it was quarantined, it was searched, government ministers were searched, and so on. And that was the final blow. And we can see that by the issuing the following month of Sessional Paper Number 10, the famous commitment in Kenya to African socialism. And it being quite clear that African socialism in Kenya represented something very different from African socialism and the Arusha Declaration and Ujamaa in Tanzania. It was much more friendly to capitalism. It marked, if you like, the culmination of the final blow to the Jaramogi standing inside the inner circles around Kenyatta. But having said all that, I want to refer to what Michael Chege said. And I want to talk in particular about the Information Research Department at the Foreign Office and its dirty tricks section, the Special Editorial Unit, which in these crucial years, 1964-65, produced 4 black operations against ODINGA. The first of which, in September 1965, saw the publication of a story, Revolution Document in Kenya, in the Daily Telegraph, which had allegedly been issued by something called the People's Front of East Africa, and which alleged that Jaramogi was to be brought to power by a recently formed People's Revolutionary Socialist Party. This story was completely concocted by the British, and it sent out 80 copies, which it hoped would be caught and published in the press. In fact, there was a major story in the Daily Telegraph which wanted to get back at Jaramogi for expelling their correspondent from